What if the real goal of entrepreneurship wasn't to scale forever, but instead to exit with freedom? Today's guest might have tickled me a little deeply, and I'm joined by Noah Rosenfarb, who has helped literally hundreds of entrepreneurs exit their companies and create generational wealth. And here's the thing that he called out that I haven't heard before, but it landed deeply. Most business owners wait too long to plan their exit or never even think about planning one if they don't have the intention to sell, and they end up trapped by the very thing that they built. Welcome back to the Mind of George show. This is the show where entrepreneurs discover that true scaling isn't about hacks or tactics. In this lens, it's about creating freedom and maybe setting your future self up for success with the things you do today. It's about aligning your mindset, your message, your customer journey, and your marketing that creates sustainable growth for you to have options that also feels authentic and aligned with who you are. My job is to cut through the noise to help you build a business that matters and make money doing it. And Noah dropped some bombs. Noah's a family office founder, entrepreneur, advisor. He breaks down the real game of building, exiting, and living with intention. We unpack his 4 freedoms framework and how to align your business to serve your life. He shares what most entrepreneurs miss when planning to sell and how to reverse engineer freedom right now. And you'll hear real strategies for wealth creation, identity alignment, and why money without meaning is still empty and isn't going to be exactly what you thought it was. And so if you are truly trying to build your business for freedom, not be a slave to it forever, or you feel emotionally tied to your business and you want out or potentially want out one day, whether you want to have kids, have a family, start another one, invest, but you don't know how, or you want to build wealth without actually losing yourself or your purpose and start doing it now, this episode is for you. And here's the thing that we have to remember. The real ROI of business isn't more revenue. It's the life that you get to live when you do it right. And so I think it's time to dive in. So let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George show. And I'm going to go straight into it. What are we talking about today? Wealth. But truthfully, might be wealth that you know and measure it, but then there might be wealth beyond money. And I'm really excited because today's guest is somebody who has enough accolades and experience to talk about wealth. He helps entrepreneurs generate predictable income, reduce taxes, build their legacy, and create their ideal life. But not only does he talk about it, he also lives it and has done it. He's a seasoned investor. He's helped with numerous exits. He's sold 8 companies for a combined total of an astronomical number exceeding 750 million, taken one public, over 50 real estate investments, valued at nearly $1 billion, author of 5 books. So there's this massive, beautiful correlation between the technical expertise, the philosophy behind it, but also the real world experience to not only guide high net worth entrepreneurs, but to help every entrepreneur become high net worth or achieve financial freedom beyond money. And so I'm excited, I'm honored, and really curious because this is a selfish episode for me. I'm going to be asking every question that I think. And I'm like, great, here we go, to be joined by my new friend, Noah. So Noah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. I think it's an absolute honor and a gift. And truthfully, I would need 8 podcast episodes to unpack the breadth of knowledge that's in your brain. So I'm going to do everybody the best service that I can. But one of the things that I was talking about before the show is I heard somebody say this to me the other day, the wealthy operate differently in the beginning. It wasn't something they started doing after they achieved money. It was something that they started operating with before they achieved that money, like a state change. And, one of the things you talk about is the secrets of the wealthy and how entrepreneurs do things differently. And I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. That might also lead to some practical tips of how we should be looking at our money, how we should be looking at our businesses, not that they're a personal bank account, but maybe a vehicle that we can utilize to create things. But I would kind of love your thoughts on that.
Sure. I actually put them together in what became a formal document called 26 Actions for Abundance, and they're available on my website.
Oh,
but I would say kind of the key one for me that, again, maybe, a lot of times wealth building is common sense. The challenge is that common sense isn't incredibly common, but spending less than you make. It's as simple as following that one rule time and time again. If you want to have financial wealth, then the only way to get there is to spend less than you make on an annual basis, on a monthly basis, on a paycheck to paycheck basis, and to accumulate savings. And then what you do with those savings, we could get into a variety of different options for what people could do at different stages of their life or their career. But if you develop that one habit, then you're probably going to be in a great position in the long run.
Mm. I love that. And by the way, I will totally get the link of that resource, the 26 things, and throw it in the show notes for everybody and include it in here. And screw it, we'll ask right at the beginning. Would you mind sharing everybody what the website is, like what your website is, where all this is?
That is probably on freedomfamilyoffice.com,
Okay.
which is my family office business.
Got it. Yeah, because you have multiple businesses. You have Freedom Family Office. You have is it Wealth
Wealth
Hive?
Thrive.
Wealth
Wealth Thrive.
Thrive. Wealth
Yeah,
Thrive, right? 5 books,
right.
right? And so just curious now, and I'm innately curious, like how did we get to today's version of Noah, right? 5 authors, 750 million in exits, real estate. Like where did it like how did you end up here?
One day at a time.
Hmm.
And just like everybody else. And, the decisions I've made at different inflection points brought me into one thing. I like to use the analogy of a swinging door. So I try not to make a decision where I'm going to enter a new opportunity and the previous opportunities all become closed to me. So when I'm going to test something new, and I've had a lot of different careers over my, working life, and every single time that I made one of those changes, I knew I could always go back and do what I
Mm.
was doing, but what I thought I was going to do next would be more exciting and rewarding. And I wasn't right in every single instance. And so, I've pivoted time and time and time again. But the way I got here was just by looking at every opportunity that came to me, filtering it through what I call an opportunity filter so that I can say no quickly because I've had the good fortune of having lots of opportunity come my way. And when I did pursue opportunities, again, I wanted to be sure that it was putting me in what I thought would be a better position to achieve my overall goals. And if I was wrong, then, pivot again.
I kind of love that because it goes against the whole burn your whole ships. You're like, well, why would I? What if I want to take it back somewhere else? I love
Yeah.
that swinging door analogy. And now I have to ask about the opportunity filter because I love that. And I think there's so much power in even how you explained that. It's not that every opportunity is the best one, it's the ones that are the right fit. So, what is your opportunity filter, or how did you create one, or how can somebody create an opportunity filter?
So I think that my opportunity filter has about 14 different items on it. I would say there's a handful that are kind of core importance to me. One was always that I didn't want to risk my financial security. So that for me meant I wasn't signing personal guarantees that could wipe away my net worth as I was building my wealth. And certainly now, where I'm in a much different position, I don't want to risk what I've built for more. Um,
Mm.
the other probably more quantitative aspect is my return on time. So, one of the things I've always tried to evaluate is not just what's my return on invested capital. So, if I put money into this deal, what's it likely or what am I expecting to get out of it? But how much time am I going to put into that deal? And what's my rate of return on that time? And every year, so I built this opportunity filter probably over a decade ago. Maybe the first year I built it, I wanted to make, $250 an hour on my time. So call it $500,000 a year. That quickly became $500 an hour, $1 million a year. Then it became $1,000 and then 2,500 and then 5,000 and then 10,000. And now it's 20,000 an hour. So I don't want to pursue a new opportunity unless if I'm in it, invest 100 hours, I want to know I can make $2 million, irrespective of how much capital I have to invest. And then
Mm.
the other probably areas, again, more on the qualitative side, would be I never want the laboring oar. I don't want to be the one that has the keys. I don't want to be the person that has to open and close and be there when the customers have problems because that's not the position I'm in anymore. I don't want to be the one where, all those problems kind of come to me. I want somebody else blocking me from those problems. I also don't want to have to be physically present somewhere in the summer because I like to take the summers to myself. And and also like other physical presence requirements, which for me are kind of lack in interest. I want to have my time and flexibility to be mobile.
Mhm. I love that. I also thank you for doing this podcast in the summer, by the way. Just gonna hit you up. I appreciate me
With pleasure.
jumping into your summertime. I love that opportunity filter, and I also love the clarity between the qualitative and the quantitative, right? The things that you can measure, but also the values, that are important to you. And I want to go back because I think in even hearing you give that answer on the opportunity filter, it kind of brings me back to my first question where you said, the truth is like building wealth is really like saving more than you spend and then having capital or a resource to utilize to be able to drive a vehicle or affect this vehicle that's going to create your wealth. And I'm just curious in that vein, you have those 26 things, but in that vein of like how to do it well, what are some of the like common mistakes because you guys have a family office, you help people do this, build wealth. What are like some of the big common pitfalls or mistakes that you see primarily entrepreneurs making at every level of business that comes to like generating wealth or setting themselves up to be like that?
I'll start with my favorite, which is somewhat self-serving, which is around taxes. Because
Mhm.
at this point, I've now built a business to help entrepreneurs pay less in taxes. And the reason I ended up building that business was because I found it to be such a common problem that entrepreneurs would have success and they thought it was their accountant's job to tell them how to pay less in taxes. And their accountant's job is more often than not to prepare their tax return.
Yep.
And there's a big gap between tax return preparation and tax strategy development. And most entrepreneurs aren't even aware that they may need two different providers because their existing provider, they just know their existing provider is not giving them what they want, but they don't really know where else to go. So I,
Mm.
I built that home for them.
Yeah, I think that's gonna take us down a whole rabbit hole that I'm totally welcome to dial into because I think you'll laugh at this more than anything. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was a Marine for 13 years and then I accidentally became an entrepreneur. But in that, my first ever digital product made $1 million in the
Wow.
first like 6 months. This was 2013, 2012. I don't think when ebooks were a thing. And I went from having basically never paying taxes in my whole life. I was a federal employee for, my whole adult life. And then it came December 30th, I think it was of 2014. And my accountant's like, all right, so you owe $250,000. And I was like, I have nine. And he's like, "What? Huh? Where did it go?" And I was like, "Oh, I thought it was mine. I've never had to pay taxes in my life. I like paid off
Right.
debt. I did X, I did Y." And he's like, "Oh my God." So he incorporated a company for me as a C Corp in Wyoming on December 31st, and then an S Corp, and then had to defer and do all these, but things that I would have never known if I hadn't have like hit that situation or even knew that that was a thing. And
Yeah.
so do you think that there is any entrepreneur that wouldn't benefit from having a tax strategist outside of their accountant or bookkeeper?
I think it depends on your income level. So there's always good ideas at every income level and good ideas that your accountant may have missed. We actually have one of the ways I ended up getting started in this business was I produced a list of what I call 23 overlooked tax strategies for entrepreneurs. Again, that list we can make available to your audience at
I would love that.
freedomtaxstrategy.com. They could download it. And basically what happened was I just saw all these people with like basic questions. They weren't using a retirement plan. They weren't paying their kids. They weren't using the Augusta rule. They weren't getting a second opinion on their tax return. So I just compiled that list and basically said, hey, take this to your accountant because I'm not really going to be able to help you in a way that serves me. And so I don't really have the bandwidth to just be giving my time ad infinitum, but I could compile this list that you could take to your accountant. And once your accountant reads it with you, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. But often they're not proactive enough to make the suggestion. But if you're proactive enough to just give them a list, they'll let you know what would work for you. And then beyond that, once you start making maybe $500,000 in a high income tax state as a single taxpayer, or you're expanding your business into multiple states or multiple product lines, and certainly once you get to $1 million of income, if as a married couple, even in a no income tax state, these different tax strategies can produce a good return on investment for you and also give you awareness of what options are available as you become more financially successful in business.
Yeah, I'm just proud of myself that like the 4 examples you listed, I'm like, "Oh, I do that." I'm like, "I do that. I know what the Augusta rule is." I was like, "Oh, I learned about conservation easements. I learned about solo 401ks. I learned about a whole lot of stuff that I didn't know." But to your point, it wasn't from my accountant. It was from an
Right.
entrepreneur I knew who was like, "Dude, you paid what in taxes? You need to talk to my guy. He's a tax flow strategist. He doesn't do it anymore." So I'm glad that and grateful that you exist now.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so I like the way that you broke that down of like it really depends on like what level of income that you're at, but I think it's worth exploring for everybody. And thank you for the resource as well. Of what did you say it was like 26 common myths?
23 overlooked tax
23?
strategies. Yeah,
Yeah.
freedomtaxstrategy.com. You could go and download that.
Freedomtaxstrategy.com. And I will admit as an entrepreneur, it's not the sexy part of business for me. I'm the like visionary guy. I'm like, oh, podcast speaking and products and coaching and consulting. But I swear if I look at all my time, my biggest ROI as an entrepreneur has come from actually like taking the time to dive into this because I fell into that trap for so long. Like, oh, if I just make more, then I'll have more. And I'm like, yeah, but I had to make more and then I paid more and then I didn't keep more. And I think
Right.
all too often we go outside of ourselves instead of like looking at the internal, like, how can I maximize what I have or how can I be efficient and have a plan here? And that's what basically one of your companies does, right? Well Thrive.
Correct. Yeah. And we find that if you're making $1 million or more in your business, nothing's going to provide you a better return on time than tax strategy. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly there are things that you might do that could consume more time and generate a greater return, but not on an hourly basis. Because you may be able to do an acquisition and double your business and double the value of your company and create a ton of value in the process. That might produce more value for you in total. But doing your tax strategy may only take, 5 to 10 hours of your own personal investment. And again, maybe it's going to save you 50 grand, 100 grand or more. So it becomes a well paying kind of side gig to get yourself informed.
Yeah, and and this might be a really easy question for you, but you said, if you're generating $1 million in top line revenue in your business, that you'll have this massive savings. Does that matter how much you're paying yourself as a salary or through distributions as that entrepreneur?
Not so much. Just to clarify, though, it's a million of income,
Million
not
of income.
net income, personal income.
Got it.
So, maybe you're doing a million gross in a coaching business and you don't have many expenses. That might still work. But if you're in an Amazon business and you've got, 500,000 going out for your product cost and another, 250 grand going out in marketing,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll still benefit from those tax idea list to bring that to your accountant. You don't need a team of accountants, lawyers, and financial planners all jumping on board unless you have this high degree of confidence that next year you're going to make $1 million and the year after is going to be 2 million. Well, maybe you want to set things up right in advance. More often than not, people come to us when they've set things up improperly, but they've had a higher level of success and now it's time to clean it up. I'd say the one exception I find is with sometimes people that are raising capital. And because of the leverage that they're raising capital, they may have very little income today, but because of the way the economics are going to work and the thing that they're going to invest in with other people's money, they're better off maybe getting things right from the start.
Yeah, I actually love that. I have a question about that. So would you say it's fair to say like with Wealth Thrive that like the big benefit or the ideal person to use that, like using your service or using your product as somebody like, truthfully netting a personal income, like, in the high six figures, almost seven
Yeah,
figures. And then
typically.
yeah. And prior to that, it's taking these conversation starters with your account and with your bookkeeper, but bringing them into your awareness of like, these are the things that you can focus on now, but also what you're working towards.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, we have a bunch of resources because, I started in this business. basically just through speaking about my own experience and helping entrepreneurs identify this distinction between a tax strategy and a tax preparer. And then people kept coming to me for help. And at the time, I wasn't looking for a job, I was retired. And so I started building resources for them. And then once I saw that they couldn't implement effectively, I decided to build this team so that I could serve them. But really, I'm serving that, one half of 1%. And really the rest of the people that need help, I'm trying to figure out how to automate it and almost TikTok strategy. They could just listen, they could ask a question to their accountant and maybe get a better result as the outcome.
I love that. Yeah. So that leads me, and when you were answering that, I had a question pop up too, because you were talking about how, there's a way to prepare yourself the right way, or there's almost this reactive approach of like, we can also kind of readjust if needed, right? And so what are some of the things that I think every entrepreneur could do best practice to prepare themselves to be in a good state if they had a windfall, or if they had something happen, kind of like best practices.
Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet.
Okay.
It's really customized to each individual's goals and objectives. So I would give you a few examples maybe of
That would be
things that
helpful.
people could have done better.
Yeah.
And the main one I see is where an entrepreneur starts their business and obviously they need to form an entity. And they go to their accountant and their accountant forms an LLC that's an S corp taxed as an LLC. And that's the most common answer you're going to get from every accountant. What the accountant doesn't ask is if you're planning to sell your business at some point and whether or not that business might qualify under Section 1202 for qualified small business stock, QSBS. And that's if you're going to develop, let's say, a SaaS product. And if you sell that business in 5 years or more, as a C corporation, you pay no capital gains taxes on the first 10 million per shareholder. Well, that's a huge tax savings opportunity.
Huge.
And unfortunately, your accountant may not even be asking you the right questions and just setting up your corporation as an S corporation instead of a C. And that to me, I see that time and time again. Somebody comes to me, hey, I'm selling my business and, I've owned it for 8 years and, we've had this success. And they would have qualified if they were a C corp, but they're an S. So now they got to pay the tax on the sale, or we find another alternative way for them to either defer or eliminate the tax. But they could have had one that was kind of in the books and pretty simple to use.
Mm. Well, that reminds me too, and I don't know if you see this, but like all I do is coach entrepreneurs, primarily, high six figures and above. But I'm still shocked the amount of people that come to me like, "Oh, how's the business up?" They go, "I'm a sole proprietor," and I'm like, "Huh? What? No." And like I have this like visceral reaction in my body because of what happened to me, 12, 13 years ago. Is there ever a time in your expertise that an entrepreneur should operate as like a sole proprietor?
Almost never.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I thought.
the main distinction is in order to file as an S corp, and not a single member LLC, which is an option, but you're reporting that on your personal tax return as well. The goal is to get a separate business tax return. And the reason you want your business tax return separate is to segregate your audit risk and also some liability. And in order to do that, you need two shareholders, two
Yep.
members. So,
Yep.
if you're married, oftentimes that's easy. Your spouse is going to have some shares and you're going to have some shares. If you're unmarried, then the question is, well, how do I get a second taxpayer? And you may get a second taxpayer by starting a trust and maybe developing your own asset protection plan. That would probably be another quite common mistake that I see is that people do not think about their asset protection strategy until they have a pending liability. And when they have that liability, it's kind of too late to do the planning, other than if you're going to do something that is probably not what we would recommend clients do, offshore tax planning that has some element of, being devious,
Hmm.
which is not, we like to be proactive, thoughtful, and compliant.
Yeah, I agree. Lessons that I didn't learn. Luckily, I never had a liability, but I had a dear friend. He's like, you need to think about protection And then we, had a trust and moved things into the trust and things along those lines. Things I still don't understand, but I'm like, cool. Like I feel protected and it's proactive. So I love that. Um, yeah, and I also love the distinction too, because when you were talking about, the S corp, the C corp, I think the other part of this too that you were sharing earlier is I think when we hire somebody, whether it's an accountant or a bookkeeper or anything, we also get to advocate for our own stuff, and we have to be empowered to ask these questions as well, which I love those resources that you have, because truthfully, I didn't know, right? Like I was a Marine, so I got my paycheck direct deposited every 2 weeks. They took my taxes. I got a small return every year. And I was like, I've made it. I was like, I'm a millionaire. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, I'm not. Not at all.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's our responsibility to be proactive. And if you don't know what questions to ask, modern technology is so amazing that take your AI tool of choice, whether it's Grok or Gemini or Perplexity or ChatGPT, and let it know what your current situation is and say, I'm going to meet with my accountant next week. What are 10 things that we should discuss that might apply to me to help me reduce my tax bill? It's going to give you great advice.
Yeah.
And it's going to, again, if you just use these new AI tools as your thought partner on everything, they're going to help you produce better outcomes when you're interviewing experts.
100%. And with that too, I think, and I'm just going to speak for myself, but I would love your thoughts on this. My lack of advocating for myself boiled down to my lack of a healthy relationship with money.
Mm.
Right. And I hear in so many things in the way that you talk about it, and even talking about wealth, like it's a tool, but it's not necessarily an identity. It's more so this thing to have. But it took me making it and losing it, making it and losing it one too many times to realize that lesson. And like you're somebody who advises so many people and you see every entrepreneur at every level, but also I can tell thinks very deeply and philosophically around money as a tool and wealth and all of those things. And so I would kind of just love your perspective on like, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship with money?
It's a great question and a unique insight because most people have an unhealthy relationship with money. And that's, I think, in large part because money's a taboo subject. So often in the homes that we grow up in, either there's a scarcity of resources, which creates a lot of anxiety and conflict around money, or we grow up with perhaps an abundance of resources, which creates oftentimes secrecy and privacy. And so, irrespective of where on the spectrum we're kind of raised in what type of family environment, often there isn't this healthy money attitude being, espoused and taught in the home. So most financial education is self-education, I find, more than intergenerational education. But for a lucky few, of which I'd put myself in that category, I had a father who was an accountant and a grandfather who was an accountant and a family of entrepreneurs, and money was a topic we always talked about in large part because my father's expertise was testifying in court when people were fighting over money. And so when we would spend every other weekend at his house, he would make breakfast on Sunday. And one of the table conversations was always a case of the week. He would describe somebody fighting over money. He'd try and describe the plaintiff side and the defense side. And he'd ask us, what do you think? Who's right and who's wrong? And then he'd tell us which side he's working for and which tactic he was taking to help support their position. And that was an education that was incredibly valuable to me, in large part to see that his motto was, watch it or the greed will get you too. He had a TV show called It's All About Money. And
Mm.
I saw that even among siblings, even among parents and their children, even among first cousins, even among best friends for 30 years, money was something they were willing to fight over to the extent that they would terminate their relationship.
Yeah. I see that wholeheartedly. And by the way, like what a great Sunday breakfast for like life lessons that we wouldn't understand at that age. And now looking back, we're like, yep, that is the thing that did it right there.
Yeah.
Like that is wisdom.
And I would also say, in contrast to my mom's house where I spent most of my time, she always had 2 jobs, sometimes 3, but I always knew when it was payday. And, I didn't have the good fortune of being able to, when I was out with my dad for dinner, I could always order dessert. We went out with my mom for dinner, it was a special occasion.
Yeah.
And so I could see the dichotomy of what having, financial resources enabled a family to do, and what the challenges it presented when there was a scarcity of it. And I knew from an early age I wanted to be wealthy because I wanted to have those choices.
Yeah, options, right? Like I tell everybody, I'm like, it's just options for me. It's not needs or desires, it's options.
Yep.
And I think you nailed it because I even find now, as somebody who lives with entrepreneurs everywhere all the time, events, dinners, everything, it still exhibits those childhood experiences or paradigms real world where like you'll go to a dinner and everybody is either introducing themselves based on how much money they make, or no one is talking about it because they're on the other side of this extreme spectrum. And it still feels like it's this very taboo thing to where there's just like all these shallow mismeasurements made by it instead of just allowing it to be a tool and a vessel of this like open conversation. And
Yeah.
it's interesting.
And it's I think it's culturally inappropriate in America to talk openly about wealth with peers unless you're in an environment that's been specifically designated as one to talk about money.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that as well. Do you feel like it should be that way, or do you feel like the conversation should change?
I would prefer that the conversation changed because I think, much like religion and politics, which are kind of other 2 topics that are
Yep.
often, not quite public conversation topics, save for the home, save for intimate conversations with, deep and meaningful relationships. I think the more you can talk openly about money, the more you can process your own relationship with money. And yeah, as you kind of prefaced, I think so many people have an unhealthy relationship with money. And the only way they're going to find a better relationship is through conversation and learning from others' experiences.
Yeah, 100%. And I have no problem admitting this in front of everybody. I live wide open on this podcast, but I similar to you, I didn't have the dichotomy of both. I just had the one. I had the social services, parents, like paycheck to paycheck. We don't have the money, addictions and stuff enrolled. And so then even when I started making it, the biggest mistake I made as I followed your advice perfectly. I saved all of it, except I never did anything with it because I was like,
Mhm.
I can't let go of it. No, no, no. Like I have it, right? Like I have this. And that was its whole thing. But even today, I see this all the time where one of the biggest mistakes that I see entrepreneurs make who are in that bubble of like cresting 7 figures a year in top line revenue, but coaching, consulting, things like that, not physical products, that they'll take a salary, but then they'll treat the business like it's a personal bank account and not its own entity. Right. And it's like distribution, distribution. I was like, no, like the business is a baby, right? Like it needs its own foods and desires, but I still see it coming up now. And it seems like it's exacerbated when the money starts to come in because it's just this amplifier of that pattern. But I would love it if the conversation changed because I think it creates such a pain point that stops us from helping or growing or scaling our business or investing in XYZ. And they're like, no, 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 like I'm going to take that vacation. Like, oh, it's 50 grand. And I was like, just because it's in the business doesn't mean it's in your personal bank account. And then I have to tell them, I was like, you're in the state of California. So by the way, that 50 grand is really 26 grand, depending
Right.
on who's doing your tax strategy. And then to put it back in. And so I see that all the time. And I love your perspective as you talk about money and you talk about wealth because I feel like it's all of our personal responsibility to build a relationship with it and utilize it as a tool and a vehicle, which really only starts by us acknowledging what our relationship is with money.
And for me, I would share that one of the main kind of shifting points for me was I bought a boat.
Mm,
And, there, all the jokes about boats are true.
yes, they are.
And so, what I thought it would cost me to own this boat was significantly underestimated. And so it really changed my relationship with money. And that was kind of the thing I've enjoyed most about my boat ownership experience is it it totally adjusted my expectations for what's reasonable versus unreasonable. And so when I live in the Miami metro market, when the Heat were in the playoffs, we went to every round of the playoffs with my wife and my kids because it was fun. And, I historically would never have spent, $2,000 on a night out with the family, time and time again. And everything became different. And I changed my framework from being uh, like a guilt around spending money to being grateful in my younger self for not only making good financial decisions, but also being able to put me in a position at middle age where I don't have to make prudent financial decisions. I can make financial decisions because it pleases me.
Hmm. Well, I also
And
think
that's a
there's
big gift.
yeah. Oh, I think it's an incredible gift. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just it landed so well because when you talk about like prudent financial decisions, I think for me as somebody like I don't coach people on healing their money mindset, but it's baked into everything that you do, strategy wise, scaling wise, even marketing wise, right? Where they're like, I'll just throw more money at it and it's going to work. I'm like, no, no, that's not how marketing works either. It's just this down the road thing. But I think the prudence piece is that I think a lot of people, what I've noticed, and I noticed this as well, is that because of that lack of healthy relationship and then we feel like we have it, we're like, oh, but like I have it, I can just spend it, and they're like, I don't want to lose all this. But I think the word prudent is huge because we think it's going to take years, but sometimes like 6 months of prudent financial decisions drastically changes your future immediately, and a couple of years down the line, going back down to what you said at the very beginning of this, which is you kind of have to have this awareness of like what's coming in and where's it coming from and how much am I keeping versus how much am I spending and what am I saving and how I'm going to use that. But I feel like there's this scarcity trap that's around where everyone's like, oh, I can't, I've hit this level of life or I've hit this level of spending. I was like, yes, but that level was never supported by the money coming in. Right. And like, it's just accrued debt. And they're like, I can't let go of it. And I'm like, but sometimes you have to, but it doesn't take as long to rewire it when you start making the right decisions.
I used a framework pretty early on where I wanted to save as much as I could comfortably. The goal was that my wife would be able to save 100% of her earnings so that, you know, when we decided we'd have kids, we could have her leave the workforce and we'd already been living off of my salary. Then it was, how do I, not only not have her income saved 100%, but also save some of my income. And I was able to do that effectively. And then over time, I decided that really the ultimate goal was, how do I put myself in a position where my passive income would cover my lifestyle? And then any active income I made would get saved and then increase the amount of passive income that I'd have. And I could basically ratchet up my lifestyle forever. So that
Hmm.
instead of ratcheting it up based on making more money this year, I could ratchet it up assuming that I could spend this amount forever. And that's been a really healthy way for me to grow my lifestyle. I was actually just talking about it with my son in the car this morning because I'm working on another new business idea and I'm very excited about it. And, I had said to him, if it doesn't succeed, my life's not going to change because the way that we've planned our expenses, I could spend what I'm spending now forever and always until I die based on my own financial projections and comfort level if I didn't work again. And that gives me a really great sense of financial freedom.
Mm. I love the way that you described that as well. And I'm just curious because I think, and this is just a complete thing, but I've heard the word passive income thrown around for the last decade and a half online. And I think people have a very unhealthy relationship with it. And in the entrepreneur world, they're like, oh, I just sell a course. I'm like, no, no, that's not passive. When you say passive income, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about if I didn't have a cell phone and I
Yeah.
didn't have access to the internet, what money would still come into my account every month?
Mm,
And to me, that means it doesn't really require my effort. Now, there's some income streams that I have where it's not quite passive, but the maintenance required to continue the stream provides a very high return on time, like I
Yep.
described before.
Yep.
So it's not quite passive income, but so long as I'm not incapacitated, I will continue to invest that required effort to generate that required return. And
Got
so
it.
that's not quite 100% passive, but it's close.
It's close.
And then there's active income, which is the income that I have to work for and I've got to show up if I want to receive it.
Got it. And would some of the passive income vehicles be like real estate or investments, or what are some
Correct.
of those?
Yeah, I would say on the passive side, there's investments I've made in other people's deals where I don't have to do anything. I write a check. I've got to evaluate the investment up front. I'm going to write a check and then I'm going to either wait around or I'm going to receive checks, one or the other. And there's nothing I'm going to do to influence the outcome of that investment. It could
Mhm.
be publicly traded companies, it could be privately held investments in debt or real estate or business interests. But all of those things for which I don't need to do anything after I've done my due diligence and written my check.
Got it. Yeah, that was I was just curious um that answered that scratched my itch, lack of better terms. I was like, "Oh yeah, what do you mean by passive?" And I like the way that you even broke down like active and passive being really the amount of time required for management, which goes all the way back to kind of like your decision filter of like filtering what you take and what you don't take and where you use your money.
Exactly. And so uh, what I find is sometimes, especially for entrepreneurs, they can generate a much higher return on investment if they're willing to add some time. And so the time becomes the accelerant to their financial success. Most often, when they've sold their company, the operating business that they had for a long time, that kind of gives them financial freedom. And then they take a portion of those proceeds, usually we recommend between 10 and 20%, and they invest it among, maybe half a dozen different businesses where they can contribute, 2 hours here and 2 hours there, or one day a quarter, or 2 to 3 days a year. And by virtue of participating and contributing their human capital, their relationships to that enterprise that they invested in, they're going to accelerate their achievement of their return on investment. And likely, in addition to the equity that they invest, to the check that they write, they should get compensated for their time as well.
Yep. Oh, I've seen that. I live in that bucket actually. That's one of the things that I do is like with companies that I've had some starters clients and like, hey, we want to bring you on the board and give you equity. And then I'm like, great, I'm here to support. Like, we want a standing call like once a month. I'm like, totally, I'm in. I'll compensate you for that. But there's like multiple vehicles that are all driving. And there's this sense of also ownership and excitement where I'm like, I'm influencing this vehicle getting to this bigger number or this goal in the future, which I love as well. I consider that passive too, because I'm like, I'm not thinking about it 24/7. I'm thinking about it like once a month or once a
Exactly.
quarter or when we do an
And when
on-site.
you are thinking about it, it's likely something you're looking forward to on your calendar, as opposed
100%.
to the things that often we're doing where we kind of look at our calendar and go, oh, another one of those. I got to make that phone call. I've got to go to that chicken dinner. I've got, what I like to do when you're kind of envisioning that future ideal life that you want to have, and hopefully it's filled with lots of passive income. And then as we're talking about like semi passive income, is to play a quick game where you go and buy a lottery ticket and you think about what's going to change if you won. And you want to answer four simple questions. What would I start doing and what would I stop doing? And who are the people I'd spend more time with and who are the people I'd spend less time with? And those four simple questions are really a guide to what you ultimately want to be doing. And often what I've found in my life is that I didn't need to win the lottery to take action on those answers. I just needed more thoughtful planning and more courage.
Those are those are profound questions. The way that you just framed that, those are profound. Like I had this visceral reaction in my gut right now and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to reflect on those ones later when I'm driving home through the mountains." Like those ones are incredible and I think for everybody listening, those are we've talked a lot on this podcast about future self and like what you want it to look like, but then starting to operate and act like it's already here now by making those decisions and those questions, I think give you this really easy noise to cut through, because I also think rewiring our relationship with money boils down to rebuilding our identity. And it's easier to figure out who we want to be instead of like trying to recover from like who we were or what it was taught or any of those things. And those questions will give you a whole lot of clarity. Like, well, I would spend more time doing X. I'm like, well, what would my business have to look like to do X? And I'm like, for me as a father who co-parents with my ex, I have my son a lot of the time, but he doesn't have school on Fridays. And I used to work on Fridays. And I was like, oh, but he's not in school. And that's a whole day I have with him. And so I was like, okay, what would my business have to look like to not work Fridays? And then all of a sudden, this thing that I thought I couldn't do and I couldn't reschedule these calls and there was no way got compressed in with Parkinson's law. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I want to spend more time with my son. I'm not going to work Fridays. And then it magically happens. And the number didn't go down, the number went up. And I was like, oh, this magical thing. So I love those questions. I love
And
them.
I found that to be true, not only for you, not only for myself, but for so many others. One of the things I talk about when I talk about kind of time and investing your time is one of the best investments I ever made was I decided to take off Wednesdays in the morning to spend with my wife, which we're recording on a Wednesday, but we're leaving for summer tomorrow. So I kind of got it snuck on the calendar here. But typically during the school year, my wife and I spend Wednesdays at the beach. And so we'll go for a walk and we'll go to the beach and we'll go out to lunch and we'll get massages. And investing that time in our relationship has paid such great dividends for both of us. And it also was a way for me to identify again, if I did have a free calendar, there was a time in my life where I didn't have an operating business and I could spend my time however I wanted, but I didn't want to be attached at the hip to my wife. I didn't want to be attached at the hip to my children, whose mom is really their primary caregiver. And I didn't want to just sit on the couch and watch TV. And so I basically created a schedule for myself that checks all my own boxes, and so I tend to work 20 hours a week, 40 weeks a year. And then the other, 12 weeks a year, I'm typically out of the office and I'm maybe working 5 hours or 10 hours, kind of depending on what I'm doing and where I'm going. And I've taken Fridays for myself and Wednesdays with my wife and kind of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday are my work days. And it's been very rewarding to put myself in a position where I feel like I have the balance that I want on average. There's certainly times where I'm busier with one thing or another. There's certainly times where I feel backed up or, I've got too much to do on the personal side or too much to do on the business side. But on average over time, I feel like I've been able to create the life that I wanted by thoughtfully planning it out and identifying what is it that I really want.
I think there's so much wisdom in that. I don't think I ever thought about planning my life out until my late 30s. Everything else was just kind of like fly by the seat of my pants. And I was like, oh, I wonder why I didn't hit a target. It's because I never designed the target. And I think there's so much wisdom in that. And, as we near the end, I want to start landing the plane. But we were talking about something earlier when we were talking about our relationship with money. And you shared, very openly about like you getting to see both sides. But you were lucky to have a parent like a father who had conversations, and accountants as a grandfather, and beyond that, but for a lot of us, myself included, financial education has been this desire to learn about. But I've also figured out that for me, I only learned because something bad happened or was in the middle of happening and it was almost like too late. And so I'm curious for you, like, where do you recommend or how do you recommend people start becoming, financially literate when it comes to wealth or when it comes to managing their money? Like, how should somebody start? Is this something that we should make a part of our day, have daily habits and rituals around? Should we read? Should we,
All the
what would
above.
it be?
I think it's
All the above.
it's the same way that we would learn a new skill. So if we wanted to learn Spanish, if we wanted to play the guitar, if we wanted any of these new skill acquisitions, how would we go about it? So first, maybe we'd search on YouTube. Then maybe, we'd buy a book. Then we'd have conversations with people who are doing it. And so there's this, you kind of weave together based on where you are and what level you're at, where you're going to seek your advice. And of course, the best outcome is often the one-on-one personal coaching. And so in our Wealth Thrive business, we talk about ourselves as being wealth coaches because although the outcome of the work that people do with us is saving money on taxes, the broader outcome that we're helping them achieve is to become rich beyond money, whatever that means to them. And in order to know what that means, we kind of have to go through that conversation of what are you accumulating wealth for? What do you want to use it for? What's the goal? What's the intention? And I've had the good fortune of working with incredibly successful people, nine-figure net worth, billionaires. And even for them, many have not thought about who is going to use this money they've created and why is it that they want to create more. They get so engaged in the game of making the money because it's a fun game. It's a very addictive game. And it's also, unfortunately, a game that doesn't often lead to a great outcome because people that tend to stay focused on playing that game morning and night, it's not dissimilar to those that are playing on Xbox morning and night. They kind of drown out all the noise around them because of this single pursuit. And it's in some ways a more socially acceptable way to have an addiction is, hey, I'm making money. And they often will say, well, it's for my family. It's like, well, have you asked your kids if they want more money from you or if they want more of your time? And
Mhm.
of course, they know the answer is the kids would rather have more time, but it's so much easier for them to spend time making money than spending time paying attention and being present with their children.
I'm so glad you said that. I've said that on quite a few episodes. I said we live in a time where we are a part of the most celebrated addiction that ends up costing because the same vein is you would be around that enough or everyone that had exits and they're like, yeah, but I will never get those 18 years of my kid back that they don't talk to me anymore. Or I sit in this giant house that's 40,000 square feet and I feel so empty and alone because like nobody wants to come over. And I was like, because I never had relationships. So I love the why of like, why are you doing this? Like, what's your North Star? What's the purpose of this? Like, that's, I think, the most important part that a lot of people neglect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So, question, and as we near the end of this, you have 5 books. Are they a mix of like tax strategy and exits, or like what are the books like at a high level so I can tune in?
Yeah, predominantly around money. So, my last book, my latest book is called Exit Rich Beyond Money. And it's our framework for how, when you're selling your company, to be in a better position on the day after the closing than you were the day prior. And unfortunately, it's kind of a hidden secret that so many entrepreneurs, after they sell their business, express regret. In large part, there's divorce, there's depression, there's a lot that goes along with the sale of a company that gets buried because it's difficult when you cash the largest check of your life to then go around and complain to all the people you care about when they're aware that you just had this financial outcome that is often celebrated. And so there isn't really a space to talk through, hey, why do I feel so bad? Even though this really good thing that I thought was happening came to me. And so Exit Rich Beyond Money is really a framework to help prevent that dissatisfaction after a sale by working through the questions and answers that one needs to have to ensure that after they sell their business, they still have meaning and purpose in their life because that's often the missing link is that we let go of what is often affectionately called our baby, and then we don't have something new to pour our heart and soul into.
Mm. That's so good, and I love geeking out and seeing a model's model on the cover of Genius Model from my dear friend Simon. Love
Yeah.
Simon to pieces. Love
So
Simon. I'm
Simon
like,
helped us develop the model. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like looking, I was like, "Oh, there's Simon's DNA." Love you, Simon Bowen. Love you, brother, if you're listening to this. Um, I love that, and I also love the point that you made too. Is like I think a mistake I see in entrepreneurship a ton is we allow entrepreneurship to dictate our identity. And that's a very slippery slope instead of having our identity and using entrepreneurship or our business as a vehicle to do something with that. So I love that, like in the book, you have it around exits of like, not losing yourself, setting yourself up when you walk away from this, making sure you still have a purpose and a reason for doing this. And so I'm assuming all of the books are linked on Wealth Thrive, or where are the
Yeah,
books?
Amazon, type my name in Google, you'll
Yeah,
find
I
me
don't.
everywhere.
You're a pretty easy one to find. Pretty
Yeah.
easy one to find. And so you got Exit Rich Beyond Money. You got what? Exit Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. 2020
Yep.
Vision. What are the other
Yeah.
two?
And the other two, one is around divorce. Actually, it's a guide for divorce. I was in the divorce industry for a decade, and the other one is called Rich Beyond Money, which is kind of our Rich Beyond Money framework. That's actually available as a download for your audience at richbeyondmoney.com.
Oh, amazing. So, guys, as I like land this, I'll go backwards. Richbeyondmoney.com, that book, Relationship with Money. Then you go back to the 23 questions to take to your accountant. Then you go to the
Yeah,
very beginning of this, which all these links are going to be in the show notes because my team is incredible. You're going to go back to the beginning with the 20, was it 26 ways?
26 actions for abundance. Yeah.
26 actions for abundance. And then you have your pick of the litter with 5 books, all written from experience and perspective, the way that you heard Noah talk about it today. Then you have Wealth Thrive, which is basically your wealth coach, if needed and if supportive for you in the right season. And Noah's pretty clear about like who it can help and why it can help. But at minimum, starting to be aware of our relationship with money, our strategy or tax strategy or lack thereof, and then starting to advocate for that to set yourself up to win. So, no, I just appreciate you sharing all your wisdom, my friend.
My pleasure. It's been a great joy for me. And what I found when I was in that retirement lifestyle, that sharing my experience was really what gave me more meaning and purpose. And the good news was the more I shared my experience, the more people reached out to me for help. And it led me to building another business that I'm really excited about.
I love that, man. I think that that's the goal every single day. That is retirement, is being of service. And so I love that. And I'm glad that we got to do this. And I support, trust me, anyone who comes across my radar, I'm going to be like, hey, them. And I have one clarifying question for Wealth Thrive, US only, or
US taxpayers,
yeah,
correct.
US taxpayers only. Got it.
Yeah. So we have some foreign clients, but they're US
But
taxpayers.
they're US taxpayers. Got it. Okay. That one clarifying, because we do have some northern neighbors that listen to the podcast and other
Yeah.
countries. But I was like, for Wealth Thrive, it's US taxpayers. So if you happen to be dual
Correct.
citizenship and your business is in the US, which is a way smarter idea than Canada, then you can use them. If it's the other way, then no.
Right.
Amazing. All right, Noah, thank you so much. For everybody listening, I think this is one of those ones where he said it, that it's just like any new skill or any new habit that we have, is we have to surround ourselves with it. We have to practice it. And I can promise you that in today's episode, there's at least one or three things that you can take action on, but they're not going to take action on themselves. So it's download one of them, look at the questions, maybe sit down and ask yourself, if I won the lottery today, what would I do more of? What would I do less with? Who would I spend more time with? Who would I spend less time with? But pick something that resonated today and allow today to be the day that you use it, that you start practicing it, you start having the conversations, because whatever actions you take today are the things that are going to influence your health, your wealth, and your life in a month, in 6 months, and in 12 months. And so let today be the permission slip. So thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the Mind of George Show. You will either see me in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, God bless. We're out.